All right, I'm going to admit everyone.
Good afternoon, everyone. We're going to give it just a minute for everyone to come in, find your seats. Haha. Okay, so good afternoon, everyone. This is the second to last Climate Friday hosted by the Center of Sustainable Development, and we thank you very much for being here. I'm particularly excited about this event. My name is Jen Wright. I'm a professor in the psychology department and this year's faculty fellow at the Center for Sustainable Development for the College of Charleston. The CSD has been leading programming this year around our shared campus-wide College of Charleston Sustains and Solves theme of global warming and climate change. The key 21st century problem you as Cougars graduating will have to solve. And everyone in this room, actually, this is a key problem we're gonna have to solve. Climate change is a threat multiplier to all realms of sustainability and therefore to creating a just, adaptive, resilient world. To build such a world, we need to work across the triple bottom line of sustainability, where the environmental, social, and economic equity systems interact, or we might say people, planet, and profit. So in order to create a just and sustainable world, we need to be able to create flourishing across all three of these legs, the social, economic equity, and environmental. Today, you're going to hear from 6 students who have been diligently bringing their personal values and political convictions into this triple bottom line sustainability space by advocating for climate justice in the Lowcountry. Together, they've helped us to imagine and work together towards a carbon neutral, climate just world, one that provides a more resilient, equitable future for all. And we're excited to hear today their thoughts and reflections on this work. Today's event is going to run a bit differently than our previous events. I have a set of questions that I will be asking each of our panelists to answer, and then we'll open up for Q&A with the audience. If you have questions for specific panelists or for the entire panel, please just put them in the chat and we'll have time to ask them at the end. So I'm going to start with the first question and ask our panelists to introduce themselves before they give their answer, and then we'll just move from there. So, in the first question, please take a moment to introduce yourself to our audience. And then the question we'd like to hear from you about is, as a student intern for the Charleston Climate Coalition, you've invested a significant amount of your time into local climate activism. How and why did you get involved in this work? And what made this such an important issue for you? And let's go ahead and start with Sydney.
Hello, my name is Sydney Gonzalez. I am a political science major here at the college. I'm a junior, and I mainly want to work in policy creation and the policy side of politics. I have a great personality, but I don't know if I'm the one for running for office just yet. And so what I mainly want to focus on is public education, minority rights, and climate change. And the reason I do this work is, in honesty, I got scared. The increase in like hurricanes and the flooding, I'm from a small town in South Carolina called Sumter, and it is not the most affluent part of the state. And my best friend's house was getting torn apart by these hurricanes. And every single time we had one, I was getting more and more nervous that her home was not going to make it out. And there was not another option. She couldn't go and get another home. Like they would end up living in their cars and stuff like that. So that's a little bit more big picture, but I also came to college, met some really cool people, saw the great initiatives happening down here, and was like, well, this is what I want to do with my life. This is it. This is what I want to do. And so this is where I know that I can make the most impact. I felt like I've been pushed to this life. This is not the one that I had originally planned for myself. I wanted to focus on public education originally. And now, to me, I have to do this. This is too important for me to put on the sidelines. So.
Thank you. Lily, how about yourself?
Hi, everybody. My name is Lily Butterfield. I'm also a third year student here at the college, graduating in the fall. I'm an exercise science major, and then I have a minor in dance. And then for future plans, I'm looking at either a master's of public health or master's in health administration, sort of with the focus on working with environmental justice, community outreach, or increasing equity in healthcare and access for healthcare for diverse populations. Um, and then also along Sydney's lines, we were in a class together last spring before everything happened, and I also agree, I got really scared. And it felt like unavoidable to address that situation or to not address that situation. And so we did a wonderful class project, and that really helped me dip my toes in the water. But then in terms of actually becoming a student intern for Charleston Climate Coalition, I got an email saying that they were accepting applications, and I thought I would jump on and see what was happening. It's not in my educational background. I think the last environmental class I was in was in high school. But after the class in spring with Sydney, I really felt like it was an opportunity that I couldn't pass up. And it's also something that I wasn't entirely comfortable with. So I also wanted to really like put myself out there and see what I was capable of. And now I know that I'm capable of a lot more than I thought. And I sort of learned that everybody's opinions are valuable, even if you don't have a background in the sciences at all. And it really helped me to feel like I was doing something instead of just sort of understanding that climate change was an issue, but not being sure what to do. This gave me an outlet to put my energy into.
Excellent, thank you. Anthony, we'd love to hear from you.
Hello, everybody. My name is Anthony Liberatore, and I am a sophomore at the University of Maryland in College Park. And I am currently majoring in environmental science and policy. And after I complete my undergrad, I haven't decided yet if I want to go and get, like a master's in urban planning and public health, or if I just want to go to law school, but I have a little more time to decide. And as for how I got involved with climate activism, it was kind of a lot of things combining all at once. I grew up in South Baltimore, so I, had a lot of experience with people living lives that were, in essence, predetermined due to the redlining and inequitable development of the city of Baltimore. So I, would see some of my classmates who in college discussions knew that that wasn't for them and knew that that wouldn't be something that they could have. And, with my mother being a social worker, I'd always had like a soft spot for people and, just helping them work through their conditions. And as I started to get older and kind of act on these feelings, I realized that our built environment does, in essence, create a lot of our social environments. And that's what kind of led me to this field of climate activism, because environmental injustice is real. It happened all over my backyard. It happens all over the United States. And I, would like to just get involved in leveling the playing field and helping to achieve that triple bottom line, because, if we create more equitable cities, that will help people and the economy, but it will also help our environment. And, with the United States hasn't really had an infrastructural reform or revolution since our country came to be. So I know that there's an opportunity there for sustainable development, and I want to make sure that our urban development is going on the most green path. So everybody from, the people, the planet, and the profit, everybody is satisfied.
Excellent, thank you. Max, you are next on my screen.
All right, my name is Max Bisaha. I study political science, philosophy, and environmental studies here. I'm a senior, so this is my last semester. And in terms of what I'll be doing after school, I really have no idea. I intend to stay in Charleston and maybe rickshaw, save up some money, and I'm really into agriculture, so perhaps I can get into sustainable ag in some capacity. But what got me into CCC and activism was, I guess, initially just multiple classes, including yours and Todd's, outlining just how much of an existential threat climate change is. And and kind of like the dissonance between growing up in society and hearing the things that need to change. Like the dissonance in your mind is pretty strong, and so I felt as though it was a good opportunity. Like Lily said, like I got an email from somebody, and so I decided to sign up for CCC, and I'm really glad I did, for sure. I also joined Climate Activism just because I really believe like in the power of local activism and change, increasingly so. I'm in an anarchy class right now. We talk a lot about community and community activism and things like that. And I just think like local government has a lot of power and a lot of sway in offering fine-tuned solutions, and I'd like to be a part of that. Yeah.
Excellent. Allison, how about yourself?
Yeah, my name is Allison Craig. I'm a senior at the college majoring in urban studies with a concentration in sustainability. And after I graduate, I hope to continue working in community organizing and environmental justice work. I'd say my activism first started my sophomore year working with the Arctic Refuge Defense Campaign. And I continued working on local campaigns and learned about CCC and started interning this year. And just very simply, I think to add on to everyone's point, I agree with everyone else, but I just feel a duty kind of to change what I can. I care about the earth very simply and all the life on it. And on to Max's point is, I think I've seen the most effective work be done locally. And so it's really important and very rewarding as well.
Thank you. And last but not least, Brian, love to hear from you.
Hey everyone, my name is Ryan Zimmer. I'm a poli-sci international studies major with a minor in Spanish here, and I'm a senior. As for what I'm doing after college, I'm also in the same boat as Max and same boat as I feel many of my peers. I have no idea. What I do know is that I'm going to continue with climate activism, whether I'm in Charleston with CCC or elsewhere, and eventually I do want to go to grad school. I just need to figure out in the meantime what for. I was looking at environmental policy, but obviously that's just one thing of many. As for how I got involved, I grew up in Connecticut, and my dad was a big like climate activist there locally. He started a land trust in our town, and there was a big like something called Metacomet Ridge in Connecticut. It's just a part of the Appalachian mountain range, and there's a lot of mining going on with it. And he fought against mining those mountains and got a lot of, I think like 30 towns in Connecticut to sign onto this agreement to stop it. That was basically my introduction to climate activism. I didn't really feel as though I could personally do anything about it until I actually had Dr. Jen Wright in Uganda as a professor, and she instilled in me the idea that there is something you can do about it and how much of a threat it is. So that's kind of why I started with climate activism kind of late in my college career.
And I didn't even pay him to say that, just so you know. So we're going to move on to the second question for you all. Climate activism is a broad space that covers a lot of territory. What aspect of climate activism do you care about the most and get the most excited about, and why? And let's go ahead and start with this one. Lily, if you could start us off.
Yes, I agree. Climate activism does cover a lot of space. But I think one thing that I became really passionate about learning more about what needed to happen in our community was the intersection of social justice and the environmental movement into a term that we know as environmental justice. And I think it is really interesting to look at how people are subject to climate impacts, most of them negative, and then what other systems of oppression are in place that really enable them to be subject to those negative impacts. And I'm learning more every day. And I think that it's really important to acknowledge that. And I feel like that's what gets me really excited about coming to work in the climate activism and really just giving back to my community in that way.
Excellent, thank you. Anthony.
Yes, so the area that particularly makes me really excited about climate activism is transportation development, because I feel like it's a great way to help our economy and help our people and help our environment all at once. You know, if you think about it, I never processed it until I read a report out of Harvard University from 2 years ago that said that access to transportation is the #1 determinant in economic mobility. So the ability to, to leave a neighborhood in our area that does not have adequate job or education opportunities is, it makes sense. If you can't get out, you're going to be stuck like that. And when you consider that we look at our rising rates of CO2 in our atmosphere and we cannot explain them with solely natural purposes, we have to look at the anthropogenic purposes in order to explain why it's rising at such a fast rate. I think that transportation development and, just this whole space of urban planning, combining the environmental justice movement, really gets me excited, because there's just so many opportunities to kind of sit down and rethink the way that we can restructure our built environment to really benefit all parties involved.
Great, thank you. Max, what are your thoughts about this?
To me, agricultural change gets me the most excited. There's just so much that can be done to improve the way we farm. I mean, we're pretty much at rock bottom, I feel like. And there's so much so many externalities to improving the way we farm, and we can improve employment measures, reinvigorate rural areas, and just improve the health of the land, health of people. So agriculture for sure, I think, is just one of the coolest things because there's so much that can be done. Yeah.
Excellent, thank you. Allison, what are your thoughts about this?
Yeah, I think I get the most excited about engaging others in climate activism. And so a part of my internship with CCC is building the coalition. And I think everyone has a role to play in the solution to the climate crisis. And so even though it can be very overwhelming because there are, it's so broad, everything is interconnected. It's definitely been a challenge for me to kind of focus on what I want to change and where I want to put my energy. But kind of activating other people to take action is really exciting to me. And I also care a lot about food systems and equitable food access. And I think my most frustrated care is renewable energy.
Yeah, especially in South Carolina. Ryan, what are your thoughts on this question?
I think for me, especially with CCC, the aspect of local politics and local activism, I am a political science nerd at heart, and kind of, even though as frustrating as it can be working with politicians, the idea of holding people accountable locally, I think, is much more feasible than obviously the national or state level. Even though there's good work being done at those levels, it's a lot harder, a lot more difficult, I feel like. And for example, with CCC, we were able to pass legislation in James Island and Charleston County more recently. And that gets me excited because that's something that affects our local community as well. It's not just easier, it's something that directly impacts us, whether it be binding or non-binding, it's still something being done. And that gets me excited.
Yeah, me too. Sydney, do you want to finish us off with that question?
Of course. So as a policy person, of course, I really enjoy passing legislation as well. Like Ryan said, And as Lily has so wonderfully explained, environmental justice is 1000% a huge part of creating policy. And specifically for me, I live for dismantling the systems that have kept us under their boot. So capitalism, I am an economic person in that way that I think a lot of our economic policies are what are hindering us. In the way that 100 people own these companies and they are the ones that are mainly the polluters and stuff like that. And so while local activism it fills you with such joy, there is large scale things that also need to be done, and those really drive me, because if we can get the people held accountable as they should be and reform, then it'll be a much easier job. So.
Excellent, thank you. And I am putting the questions that are being asked in the chat just in case anyone wants to keep the narrative in their mind. So the third question is, what have you found to be the most challenging, the most difficult part of the work that you're doing and why? And I'm going to have Max start us off on that question.
Perhaps for me, one of the most challenging things is like striking a balance between trying to change the behavior of people, but not like blaming them, putting them down for just being a part of broader systemic problems. I guess kind of like respecting their agency, but at the same time, not giving them so much agency as to say that like, you are the problem, like systems, to be clear, are the problem. And just like, yeah, finding the fine line between shaming and just trying to inform people about the consequences of climate change, especially people who, climate deniers is particularly hard to kind of find that balance.
I appreciate that, especially living in the South. Sometimes it feels difficult. Ryan, how about yourself? What do you find the most challenging in this work?
I think everything that Max said as well. I think personally staying consistent, and that's something I think Belvin's in here, but Belvin, one of the co-founders of CCC, it really helped me with, and I was kind of scattered all over the place last semester, not really staying consistent with work, but we figured out a way to just meet like Monday, Wednesday, Friday, even for an hour here and there, and just do work. And that has really helped me like get more involved, and avoid just like idling around and not doing anything. So thank you, Belvin.
Yes, thank you, Belvin. How about Lily? What are your thoughts about this? What do you find most challenging?
I find most challenging sort of feeling content with the work that I'm doing and feeling like it's enough. Because climate change is such a huge issue, there's so many things to tackle. And I also feel like with my background not being really in the natural sciences or poli-sci, sometimes I'm like, what do I have to offer? But I think constantly just sort of reminding myself that I belong where I am, and I have valuable contributions to make, really helps keep me going. But I find that pretty challenging sometimes just to deal with my own mental state.
Yeah, I hear that. Sydney, how about yourself?
Yeah, so since what I like to do is policy and passing legislation, the hardest part and the most challenging part is trying to work within the conservative South that has built up this repertoire for not, like Max said, not believing in science and climate change as like a problem. And so trying to figure out like wording, and then like also having to, compromise because I want this enforcement part of the legislation, it will not pass. So like, how can we still keep the enforcement, but like change the wording or something like that to make it better? But then sometimes legislation doesn't pass at all with any enforcement. So it's a little bit more of like we did it, which kind of, it's like a double-edged sword where it's like, at least we're talking about it, I guess, but like we can't enforce that legislation and stuff like that, which has been a really big problem with climate legislation in general, is it not being able to be actually effective. because it has been watered down so much by the political process, especially in the South. It's very hard to find legislation at all for climate-based stuff in the South, but especially good and effective Southern-based legislation.
Yeah, our work on the resolutions has certainly been a lesson in all of that. Allison, how about yourself?
Yeah, I would also kind of building off Sydney's point, I think the biggest challenge for me is or has been explaining that climate change is not political in nature. It's more about kind of protecting and defending human and ecological rights. And I mean, everything is essentially political. And the policies obviously perpetuate the status quo, but I think that makes people hesitant to take a stand for climate action. But in my work with CCC, I've been surprised by the overwhelming support for climate action in Charleston and the urgent need for it as well. And then another difficulty I've had in grassroots organizing is motivating individuals. And so everyone has their own unique motivations for why they work and work hard. And sometimes this work can be slow and frustrating, and the legislation doesn't have teeth, and it might take a while to see your results pay off, but they do. And so I think it's important for me to remember that like the labor of my love will be rewarded.
Well said. Anthony, do you want to finish us off with this question?
Yes, ma'am. One of the things that I struggle with in my personal climate activism is it's kind of like what Lily said. Sometimes I want to know, why I'm making the statements that I'm making, who qualified me. Especially as a white man that's had many opportunities in my life, I know that I really don't want to step on the toes of not only just, communities of color, low-income communities in general, but on top of that, many of these communities have been asking for things like environmental justice for decades. So I think one of the things that I struggle with is making sure that everybody that should have a voice at the table is at the table, but that no voice is speaking louder than another. Just using my example for transportation development earlier, you would think that oftentimes, even in discussions like that, the developers are the ones who get the loudest voice and they get the largest say, and the budget has to go with, what they're working with. And we don't think about the communities that are going to be harmed through the construction, through the, the physical divide of a highway or a train line. So I think that's always been something that I've struggled with personally, but even on a larger level, is making sure that we have an equitable representation in whatever team we're working on. But luckily, with CCC and just community in general, I feel like we go out of our way to make sure that we're talking to members of the community. And while we all know that we're doing our own work, we realize it's for everybody else. So I kind of comfort myself in the fact that, just being here and wanting to do the work is good, but kind of like what Sydney was saying, it's, we want to make sure we pass something tangible. So making sure people who need to be in there are in there can be difficult.
Thank you for that. So we're going to move to our next question.
Jen, you muted yourself.
Oh, good heavens. That's because I put the wrong question in the chat and then I got discombobulated. All right, so here's the question. Nope, why is it not copying? I'm just going to read it. So as a climate activist, how do you avoid burnout? How do you cope with eco-anxiety and anger? And how do you protect your mental health as a student and a climate fighter in the midst of a pandemic? And I am going to ask Allison to be the first one to address this question.
Yeah, so burnout for me, avoiding it is a daily task. I have a various array of grounding practices that I employ daily to avoid it. And I think I experienced more eco-anxiety in high school. I feel like I felt paralyzed by like the burden and inaction in my community. And it wasn't until I started taking action that sort of started to fizzle. And now I think I experience more eco anger. but I've learned to channel it in productive ways. So if I'm angry, there's a reason, and I'm gonna scream about it until I'm heard. And that can be done. I've done that in various ways, like letters to the editor, social media, city and county council meetings, supporting other local activist groups. And one big way I protect my mental health is being by water. In Charleston, we're surrounded by it. And whenever I'm in or near water, I feel very grounded and centered. And so it's definitely a source of peace for me. And just general kind of like life self-care. To quote the Stoic philosopher Marcus Aurelius, he said, "I am rising to do the work of a human being." And so I think of that almost daily.
It's beautiful. Thank you. Sydney, tell us a little bit about your practice for keeping sane.
So I'm not gonna lie, not doing the best with this right now. So take everything I say with a grain of salt. But generally, as Allison said, anger kind of fuels me. If I'm mad that something is happening, I am the most active about it, because anger is something I can use. You know, it's a tool. Sadness and that anxiety is what can cripple me, though. I mean, I've broken down in a literal like meeting before. Jen was there for it. I started going all hype, and then I slowly got sad throughout my answer, and then I started crying. It was horrible. And like I've talked to like friends of mine that didn't believe in climate change, and I started crying because I was like, you don't understand. I want to grow old with you, you know, like I love you, and like, yeah. So I've definitely felt that. And I guess the best thing I can say is to delegate and communicate. If you know that it is not your week, so I was having a really bad week the other day, and I had to come in with a climate report on my research that I did for our CCC meeting. And I was like, I've done absolutely nothing other than lay in bed sad. So I don't have anything to give you. And I was like, I don't know, should I try to like force myself to do this? But then I just sat Jen down and I was like, I'm sorry, I'm depressed. Can you give me a break on this real quick? And she was like, don't worry about it. That's part of why we're a team, you know? It's okay to take that break if you need it. And so that's the communicate part, and then delegate part. So me and Lily have worked together in the past, and you know, we would have our meetings with Jen, and she would list out all the things that we need to do, and then me and Lily afterwards would be like, okay, I'm gonna handle this, you're gonna handle that. And if I slacked off, I was like, can you help me out here? Or if Lily had like an issue or something, she would text me as well. So it's, again, doing this as a team really does help. Find your people, and don't go out on your own, you know, like find a group that you really like and you support and do it with them.
You just called me your people. Oh, so Ryan, how about you?
Yes, I think I was gonna say like communication and staying within the group. I guess something also, as a political science student, I remember thinking like, what am I doing? Like, I'm just funneling myself into the same system that has like advanced all these problems, and like thinking about like whether I was getting anxiety about changing majors, about like am I even doing the right thing here? And I think by joining CCC, I was able to see that I can still do the right thing and do good work, like with the path I'm on. And there's so many different options with that as you get more detailed into it. I think one thing that has worked for me is just staying kind of lighthearted about it. I kind of do this with a lot of things, and I mean, I am serious about it, but like I live with Max, and you know, jokes here and there help. Follow some climate meme pages. Honestly, if I didn't, it would be a disaster for me. So I think just staying lighthearted is a good thing to try.
Yeah, it's important to always keep some humor in your heart. Anthony, how about yourself? What do you do to maintain your sanity?
Yep, this is an important one. I know when I started climate activism, when I was young, growing up in Maryland, there's just like Charleston, there's water everywhere. You go to the grocery store and you drive over 3 bridges. So my youthful activism was very much like, we can save the Chesapeake Bay because everything went back to the bay. But then as I started learning more about it, I kind of started to get a lot of anxiety, especially as I got to college, and I was, realizing that the systems that are in place, the American empire and all of these things, those can't be dismantled on the singular personal level. Like, that's going to take a lot of local, state, national, and even international work. So I started to get really anxious, but one thing that has helped me stay motivated and stay on top of it has just been simply talking to community members. I know that, whenever I get a little bit anxious or upset or whatever, if I go to talk to somebody who's directly experiencing something like this, or I guess in the pandemic, it's a little harder to do that. So I might, read some studies or watch some interviews or anything like that. The exigence all just kind of floods right back to me and reminds me why I'm doing it. And, I don't want to say it tells me I can't stop, because that's not good for your mental health. But at the same time, it reminds me that, just like Sydney and Allison, I'm just as angry and upset. So sitting back and being upset about it's not going to help me. I want to be reminded about why I'm doing it, and then it allows me to keep going. So, yeah.
Thank you for that. Max, how about yourself?
Yeah, I definitely agree with you, Anthony, that seeing people out there definitely cultivates a lot of inspiration. But I also have a lot of like introspective techniques that, kind of like Allison was saying, that I employ. Just a lot of like, I like doing like craft type things. Like, I've been carving like wooden spoons, and I like to make bread, and I like to ferment things and garden. And those kind of tasks like kind of keep your mind busy, and they keep your mind busy in a way that's like productive and healthy. And it keeps your mind off of larger existential threats such as climate change. But additionally, obviously, communication, talking with friends and my therapist, both of which are difficult to come by in this pandemic. But if you can get them, talk to them. And then also podcasts. I love podcasts. I listen to a ton of podcasts. So if anyone wants a recommendation, hit me up.
Excellent. Thank you. Lily, would you like to finish us off on this question? What do you do to maintain your sanity?
Yeah, I want to reemphasize Sydney's point just about being able to lean on your team and surrounding yourself with people who really have your back, and just knowing that you don't have to take everything on yourself. And I think it's also really important to disengage every now and then, and sometimes just completely forget about the issues that exist and just be in your own space, in your little bubble where you can pretend for a little bit that everything is okay. I find that space in my rehearsal for dance. It's really nice just to be with friends, working in movement and being in my body instead of in my mind. Or sitting on the couch with my roommates, watching a movie and not thinking at all about what's happening to the earth or climate change. And just knowing when to step back. And it helps to step back into your activism role with a refreshed mind.
Wonderful, thank you. And I think in the interest of time, because I want to make sure that we have plenty of time to hear from our audience, I'm going to combine, we had 2 questions in mind to answer, but I'm going to combine them into one. And the question is, what message would you like to share with our audience, and why, why should they care, and what should they do about climate? And we had thought of this as being like, what would you share with parents, teachers, and community leaders? And then also, what would you share with other students and younger generations? So I'm going to let you pick which of these you would prefer to address. Do you want to address, those of us who are responsible for the state that we're in, or those of us who are following behind your footsteps? Whoever you want to communicate with, you feel most motivated to communicate with, please do. And then we'll open up the floor for some questions. So please, those of you in the audience, things that you'd like to hear from any particular panelist or a group of panelists, please don't be shy. go ahead and put them in the chat. And I'd like, Ryan, I'd like you to start us off on this question. What would you like to tell the audience?
So I think, so I was thinking more for students, but I guess this could apply in general. So like everyone has like their different paths in life, like different career goals, everything, but it doesn't mean that you can't be a climate activist, like whether that be on the side, full time. I think people sending emails to their county councilors, people doing stuff at like on their own time are just as important as people passing legislation, because it's all part of the idea of us working towards a better change, like changing our system, changing our community. And I think not being discouraged by whatever you're doing as a student or whatever you're doing as an adult in like your career, as there's always room to do something for climate change. And then I think as well, I guess teachers, parents, like you do care about the next generation and your own generation. It's something affecting us now, and it's something that's going to continue to affect us. And as for community leaders, I think something that really bothered me with the local legislation is like, and even just climate legislation in general, is the idea, the answer of like, this is too political. But coming from politicians or coming from our community leaders, where this is like inherently political, like you can't just sit there and say it's political and not make a decision on it. And I think that's something to keep in mind, and something not maybe why you should care, but not an excuse for our community leaders.
Thank you for that. Allison?
Yeah, I would say one thing to focus on are leverage points. So like everything is interconnected, and there are kind of specific points where if you make a small shift in one thing, it will ripple out and have a much bigger effect, and make big changes in everything. And so those are going to be different in every community on different levels. And so addressing those, I think, is an important first step. And yeah, you should care, because like your health and safety right now depends on it, and for future generations. And I think that we hear a lot about individual action, like steps you can take, of course, like eating a plant-based diet, being conscious of your consumption habits, composting, and having a native garden are all really excellent things. But I think getting involved in collective action is really key to motivating you. And I said this earlier, but everyone has a place in being part of the climate solution. So, you know, every member of your community does, and everyone has their own path and what they are interested and focused on. So I would say just follow that and speak up, because your thoughts and feelings are very valuable to this movement.
Excellent, thank you. Sydney, what would you like to say?
I'll keep this short and sweet. If you aren't mad, you aren't paying attention. As the other two have previously said, it's not about future generations, it's about the current ones, and not just the youth. Everybody is feeling these impacts every single day. It's not just when hurricane season's around, it is every single day. And as Allison said, get involved. If you're here, you care about this problem. CCC is a wonderful organization that you can get involved with, but it is very research heavy. So if that's not your thing, you can go for Sunrise. We just started a local chapter of Sunrise, and they are a more hands-on organization that is out there doing events. So if that's something you're more into, there's also the policy side. You have Citizens Climate Lobby. I believe we have a CFC chapter. And if not, we have a larger Charleston chapter. And if you want to get involved in a little bit more larger based stuff that isn't just in climate portions, there's groups like Cage, in which I'm involved in, political campaigns for local elected officials, or even, you know, presidential campaigns. Get involved if it's something you care about. It is very, it is very nervous, and it is very nerve-wracking. Drag a friend along if you have to. They can come along kicking and screaming, but it's one of those things that if you keep telling yourself, no, you're nervous, you're not into it yet, you are never going to do it. So just rip the Band-Aid off, go hit up one of these organizations that I just listed, hit me up, I'll point you in the right direction. So yeah.
Excellent, thank you. And I was just looking, I put the the Charleston Climate Coalition website in the chat. I was looking for Sunrise and I don't see it right off in my email. So if someone would mind putting it in there, that would be great. Thank you. And then Lily, what are your thoughts? What would you like to say to our audience?
I think it's, as everybody else has kind of mentioned, it's not just young people's fight. I think that's something I hear a lot, is that the youth are going to spearhead this movement and it's going to be their future that they're changing. But like Sydney said, everybody is a part of the society right now. And societal change can't happen without all of society being a part of that change. And so as someone who has the privilege to act, if you can, I think it's your duty to act. And I think you can become a little selfish sometimes, thinking I can leave this problem to somebody else and they're going to take care of it. But if you're not going to take that role on, you can't count on anybody else to take it on. So I think that just understanding the power that you hold as an individual and finding people who can join you in that fight is really important to keep in mind.
I wholeheartedly agree. Anthony, what would you like to communicate from afar?
I think one thing that that has been coming back to me in terms of my climate activism is that, especially in the past, 3-4 years, we've kind of realized that we aren't as united or as similar as we might think we are in this country. But if there's one thing that we are all going to be affected by, it is going to be climate change and different effects. It doesn't matter if you're rich or poor, live in the North or South, it's going to come to you in some regard. But I think, and while that might scare you, that might make you think, get all anxious, I think if that proves anything, it kind of proves that we are collectively one large family. And I know that if something were to happen to one of my family members, I would want to do everything that I could in order to help them. So when I see certain members of our community being boxed out of economic and just quality of life principles that all the rest of us have, I, as one of their family members, I would want to do something for them. So, and I think for the older generation that sometimes is wondering, if their time has passed, if this is really for them, I kind of like to raise the question, we think it's okay to start savings funds for your children's college educations and to take out mortgages to make sure you have something to leave your kids. But when are we going to add the environment into something that we all want to leave for the generations after us? Because again, we're really all one collective family. So my choice to limit my air travel or my choice to not support unsustainable businesses could be much greater than myself. It could truly help both my kids' kids, and all of your children. So I think that's kind of something that motivates me. Maybe I'm just feeling a little bit more family oriented these days since being stuck in the house for the past year. But, I think we're all one collective group. And I think if there's one place that we can try to unite, it can be around the environment.
Excellent, thank you. Max, you're going to bring this one home for us.
All right, I guess my answer for why people should care about climate change is I immediately think to how some people's perceptions of climate change is that it's just like there'll be a couple more hurricanes and like it'll flood rich people's beach houses, and that's like the extent of it. But the realities of climate change is like that's the least we have to worry about. Obviously hurricanes and flooding on the beach are a huge issue, but it means so much more. Like species extinctions, and like the Gulf Stream is slowing down, the jet stream is slowing down. You have the whole ecosystems and whole non-biological ecosystems like on the brink of collapsing. And there's so many, like, we rely on these things, and there's just so many aspects to climate change that go untalked about. So I think that's such an important thing to keep in mind, that it's not just hurricanes and flooding that pose an issue. It's so much more than that.
Thank you for that. It's, I think, a very powerful way to end. And I'm going to go ahead. I'd love for those of you in the audience to go ahead and chime in with some questions in the chat box, but we do have a couple to start off with. So the first one is, and I'm just going to open this up to the panel. Anyone who wants to chime in can. But the question is, how do you get more involved in opportunities that will help set you up for your environmental career outside of college?
I'm okay. I'll start, I guess. Volunteer, you know, intern for things. Do it because you want to. And usually you will find a path into what you want to do. So I joined CAJM because I wanted to. They do local activism that I care about, and I'm just on for the ride. But I'm also now planning on applying for their positions that they have open when I graduate, you know? And so just do what you love, get involved with what you love. And like I said earlier, I listed off all those organizations, and that might be part of the answer, is just look at what's going on and get involved in any way, shape, or form. And then over time, you know, seniority actually kind of matters. And the more you know, so.
Does anyone else want to add to that?
Yeah, I will. I was just going to say, well, I don't have solid plans for after I graduate, but I think just networking, once you get involved, start using your voice, get to know more people in the movement, that will set you up to develop your career more.
Anyone else?
Yeah, I can go next. I think something that that I at least tell myself, I've kind of getting to a place where I'm, you know, wondering what I'm going to do when I graduate college. So one thing that I've realized in my climate activism is that I can't name a single career that does not have some sort of environmentalism involved with it. So I think, you know, if you know you want to help the environment, you know you want to get involved, that's fine. Don't lose that strength. But if you, no matter what field you're going into, whether it be education or if you want to go into research or, you know, you want to go into the legal profession, anything like that, there are so many opportunities not only to make a sustainable impact on a broader level, but even if it's something as much as, you know, offering up like a little thrift store in your office, you know, you can be a sustainability cheerleader or whatever term you want to use, to just kind of bring it at your local level and whatever you do. So I think there are, no matter what career you choose, there are so many ways that you can bring environmentalism into the workplace, which again, you know, whether your office is 10, 20, 50 people, it's getting people involved. So there's plenty of opportunities to get involved.
So I'm going to turn to another question. On the public education side, we have to start from an early age to teach that our actions have consequences. It isn't equal across the world, and especially in the States. How can we start to figure this out? Policy is a start, but we still have states' rights. Look at Texas and the energy crisis with the ice storm. So what are your recommendations in particular on the public education side?
Speaking from my public education experience, I think when I was younger, I didn't really think about climate activism because I didn't see it. It wasn't a strong force in my community. And so I think that can really help the public education system and kind of active engagement for education as well, like getting your hands in the dirt.
Anyone else want to chime in on that one?
I just want to sort of emphasize the role that individual teachers play. I grew up in a pretty small rural town, but I can still remember my high school science teacher, whether it was approved in the curriculum or not, he brought climate change into what we were learning. And he took that step maybe on his own and sort of stuck his neck out for his students to be able to understand that. So I think being aware of the policy, but also being aware of information that is really important for young people to understand, and bringing that into what you're doing as a teacher.
This might not be 100% like what the question, I don't have an answer for you that's like, oh, individually you can go and do this. This is more of a structural change thing, but this is what I focus on, is structural changes. And public education is something that I've always been really interested in, because South Carolina is 46th in the nation for our public education. Okay, we are not doing well in general, but especially, I didn't know that climate change was a problem until I got to college. And then I had to do a full 360 on what I wanted to do for the rest of my life, because this is such a big issue. So not everybody goes through that. Not everybody gets that opportunity. A lot of people do not go to college, so they never learn about these things. And I'm a big fan of federal regulation of what we teach in our public schools, in some way, shape, or form, because states are allowed to do whatever they want. And therefore, South Carolina has no mandate at all in any way, shape, or form for any type of environmental anything. My geography class was memorizing state capitals. That's it. I don't know about anybody else, but I literally, my earth science class was about volcanoes. That, like, there's no education in that form at all. And so having some type of enforcement on a federal level is my recommendation for it. But again, that is not something that, a individual can do, but there are probably organizations that are pushing for that type of a thing. So you could go and support one of those types of organizations.
Thank you for that, Sydney.
I just want to quickly add on Sydney's point. I don't really have an individual solution as well. I'm kind of going off hers, but just like personally, I feel that as well. And with like my high school didn't even have like a geography class, or our environmental sciences was, I think we just had like biology. So like only, and that's like a big problem that I think a lot of groups are focusing on. I'm not entirely sure, but if that is of interest to people, it's a really important issue.
Absolutely. So I can open it up just to our audience, where we are a group that we can, I mean, if anyone wants to just unmute and ask an additional question, we've got a couple more minutes here. Anything that you'd like to hear from the panelists that you haven't already heard? Those of you who are in the audience. Kellyanne, we can't hear you. No worries. While Kellyanne is fixing the issue, is there anyone else that has a question for the group?
Do y'all know how great you are?
I think that's a legitimate question. Do you guys all know how great you are?
Same question could be asked of Belvin.
Stop.
So it looks like we have a question from Kellyanne. What environmental work in Charleston are you most excited about? Like, what's going on right now that excites you the most? I'll just open it up to the panel.
Yes, thank you. I got my headphones.
There we go.
I know for myself, it's not exactly environmental work, but I get most excited when I get my CSA every week from Spade and Clover. So.
Oh, okay.
Kind of on that note, I've been organizing Low Country Farms for climate action and Low Country Restaurants for climate action. And that has been super exciting.
I think I'm.
Oh, sorry, Ryan, you can go.
Okay, thank you. I'll just be quick. I think I'm really excited about Earth Day and just seeing what everyone has planned, what's going on that day, especially with COVID. It's going to be some interesting out of the box ideas. So.
Thank you all. It's very inspiring work.
Anthony, did you have something you wanted to add?
Yeah, I know that I saw that Charleston Climate Coalition, well, also me, but we're, I know, working to kind of support Gadsden Green and the community against the development in that area. So I know that, you know, it's right up my alley, sustainable urban development. So I'm personally interested, but I know that just trying to work with these communities and being in the heart of, you know, grassroots activism, talking with the people there, finding out their needs. I know that that's something that I'm personally excited to do. I know it's rather like a morbid and upsetting kind of topic, so it in itself is not exciting, but just kind of working with the community is something I think that will be very interesting.
Excellent. Well, thank you all so much for your time. We are now over our allotted time, but I really appreciate the audience for coming. And I really appreciate all of you coming, you students coming, to our interns that have worked so hard since the pandemic started. We couldn't have done what we've done so far without you. So thank you for being here. Thank you for being you, and know that we are celebrating you. And I hope you have a wonderful weekend, everybody. And we look forward to seeing you all again for our final Climate Friday. I don't know, Darcy, if you have that slide, but we have one more coming up on April 9th. And that will be Dr. Seth Pritchard and Drs. Lisa Young. And they're going to be talking about sustainable agriculture, learning from Indigenous practices. So that'll be really exciting. And thank you very much. If you haven't taken the climate pledge yet, then you can see the URL there on the slide. Please do. And look forward to seeing you all again. Take care.